Hey, Chef Ro here. Today we're going to talk about French meringue. French meringue is when you use raw egg whites, raw sugar, mix them together, and make a meringue. But because it is unstable, because neither the egg whites nor the sugar are already cooked, you do have to cook it. This is not the meringue to use for the top of a lemon meringue pie. Now, because it is not as stable as the other meringues, some people will put a pinch of cream of tartar in there that changes the acidity level of the egg whites and makes them a little more stable. So if you're piping a large batch of something like French macarons, which if you're using the French meringue technique, there's various ways of making them, it leaves it more stable so you can pipe it for longer without it deflating in your hands. Okay, so French meringue, raw egg whites, raw sugar, maybe a pinch of cream of tartar. Okay. The thing is that you have to make sure that there is no fat in the bowl, no fat on the whisk, and you did not get any of that egg yolk into your egg whites. Egg whites and fat are enemies. Egg white has a lot of enemies. You also want to make sure the bowl's not wet because it doesn't like water. You also want to make sure that if you're going to add any flavorings, you do it at the end, right? If you're, for example, going to make meringue crispy cookies, any extracts have a high enough alcohol content usually that it will affect the whipping of the egg whites. Okay, now most people generally use granulated sugar when they're making meringue, but sometimes you want to use brown sugar for a more caramely effect. The difference is you have to wait a little bit longer to put the brown sugar in because it's got a higher moisture content. And remember, I just said water is the enemy. So I'm going to show you both places that you put them in. Now the reason that you can't just dump the sugar in the egg whites in the beginning is that sugar is denser than egg whites. So all it's going to do is sink to the bottom and stay there. And you run the risk of it not fully incorporating. Most recipes are going to read that you let it mix until the egg whites get foamy. What that means is that the protein structures and the bonds are starting to form, and they'll create like a little net that'll catch the sugar as you pour it in. That's going to prevent it from going straight to the bottom of the bowl. I'm going to show you how we do it. Here we have our egg whites. Now you can see that these are just raw egg whites, and I have sugar here also, and since we're using just granulated sugar, all we're going to need to do is get these egg whites foamy first. If we were using brown sugar, we'll have to put it in a little bit later because of the extra moisture in the brown sugar. But I will stop the camera and show you when you would be able to put in that brown sugar as well. What we're going to do is we're going to put the stand mixer down. We're going to start it on about a medium speed and just let those protein bonds start forming so that they capture the sugar as it comes in. Once it gets foamy, we'll be able to rein in the sugar, and I'll show you exactly what that means when we get to that point. Okay, our egg whites are foamy. This is where we can start reining in the sugar. You can see the foam that is formed on top of the egg whites. This is where you can stop. The protein bonds have started to form, and they'll now catch the sugar appropriately. So we're going to turn this back on a medium speed or so, and we're going to take this sugar here, and we're just going to rein it in. I'll show you what that means. You want to rein it in gently, in a single steady stream so that it's not all dumped in all at once, or else it'll still just sink to the bottom. So just a steady stream, and once it's all in, then we can flip it back up to a high speed and let it rip. Again, this is where you only put in granulated sugar. Brown sugar would have to go in later. Now that it's all in, you can see I've got all the sugar in. It's incorporated, it's not sinking to the bottom of the bowl, so we should be able to continue whipping this until we get a nice fluffy meringue. Now that it's all incorporated, we're going to put this back down. We're going to flip it just up to a high speed. I will stop it where we could add the brown sugar, and I'll show you what those eggs would look like. Here you can see that the egg whites have gotten very thick and they've turned bright white. Now that's in part because of the sugar.
but it's also because the peaks have started to form, the protein bonds have formed. So this is strong enough that if you wanted to add the brown sugar right now, you could. You would still do it in small amounts, just like you did with the granulated sugar. But this is where you could add your brown sugar. Now we're going to flip this back up to a high speed and let it rip until stiff peaks form. That's when we have a true meringue. Once we get there, I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, our meringue has reached stiff peaks, and I'm going to show you how to check. Most people make a serious error by using the whisk to check the peaks, and that doesn't work as well because gravity is going to get in your way. If you notice, when I flip that over, the peak just flops right over, and it to me looks like it's at medium peaks, even though I know that I'm at stiff peaks. So you don't want to use that because gravity is just going to go against you. What you want to do instead is you want to gently pull from the bowl, and if you notice in the bowl it's holding its peak quite nicely. Okay, so we know that it's at stiff peaks because we're checking in the bowl. If I flip it, gravity makes it medium. If I just pull straight out of the bowl, it's going to be stiff peaks.
Now you know how to make French meringue. What fun recipes are you going to make with it?